What if the victim was defending himself from a 6,000-pound car? That leave a different type of wound than this?
This is not caused by a car.
So what evidence do you have that the victim was defending himself, which caused this shape of wounds?
Again, it's very common for someone who's under attack to take their arm and flex it in front of them to protect their vital organs,
Okay.
the neck, head, face.
So if Mr. O'Keefe is flexing his arm to defend himself, that doesn't answer the question, what identifying feature with specificity in these support any conclusion that it was a canine tooth that caused either of them?
Well, first, in general, it's the canine teeth that are going to impact because they are much longer than the incisor teeth.
Right. The question I have is, look at these two scratches here. What objective evidence do you have, based on methodology, comparative analysis, what evidence do you have that either of these were caused by a dog tooth, a canine?
Again, the methodology is that I looked at the overall pattern of the wounds on the arm, not just those two wounds up by the shoulder, but the overall pattern.
So your testimony is, if I look at everything together, I can have an opinion. If I look at this separately, it means nothing.
If I look at it separately, I cannot be as definitive, correct?
Well, not as definitive. I'm asking you for an opinion. You don't have any evidence that this has any relation to a dog bite. Without looking at the whole arm and giving that general opinion we'll get to, you have nothing as far as facts or comparative analysis or studies that would say that this was caused by canines on a dog, do you?
It's consistent with two canine teeth. There's a distance between those parallel marks.
Did you measure the distance between where this begins or ends, because you don't know, and this begins or ends?
I would have loved to, but...
If I could just finish, I'm sorry. Did you measure the distance between this and this and this and this?
I could not measure it because there's no ruler in that picture.
You know that when a dog bites, the canines don't move. Unlike paws that might open or close, the teeth stay the same distance apart, don't they?
Correct.
There's nothing that you know of in any dog science that canines, when they bite, they open or close or get wider or more narrow. They're always the same distance, right?
With it, for that dog, yes.
Right, that dog.
Assuming that they're healthy teeth, yes.
Okay. And you don't know if they're healthy teeth or not because you never looked at Chloe.
Correct.
Okay. And you're not saying there's any punctures anywhere in here, are you?
I don't see a definitive puncture.
Well, do you see a puncture that's not definitive?
At the very lower aspect of the photo, this area is not well defined.
So you're saying this is possibly a puncture?
I can't rule it out by that photograph.
Well, couldn't you rule it out through other analysis and evidence? Couldn't you rule it out, as we just spoke about, because if this was the puncture, that means the bite is going this way. And if it's going this way, the arc is in the total opposite direction. Couldn't you rule it out just on that?
I couldn't rule it out, but it certainly makes sense that it would not, that the punctures would not be down below.
Well, not does it not make sense. It makes no sense that it would go this way. It wouldn't be going up if the dog has an arc going this way. The arc would have to be this way.
It depends on the position of the victim.
A dog's arc is not going to change depending on the position of a victim.
No.
And the dog's canines are not going to move depending on the position of the victim.
That's right, but if he's bending over, and depending on the position of the arm, the wound can change. The wound can have a different appearance than what you would expect.
Okay. Let's move on to number 2, which I'm identifying as these two linear scratches and then the scratch on the bottom. And you've testified about this wound number 2, although you didn't characterize it as wound number 2, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you first testified under oath in the voir dire about wound number 2, do you remember what you said that you thought that might be?
I believe I said bites or scratches.
Teeth or claws, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at trial, did you change your opinion at all about teeth or scratches?
I'm not sure.
Do you think you said at trial that this was not scratches, but most likely teeth?
I may have said that.
Okay. And then you testified at this hearing, didn't you?
Yes.
And now definitively you're saying this wasn't scratches at all, it was teeth.
Definitively, I cannot say that. They
Okay.
still could be scratches. There's a possibility that two adjacent nail marks made that.
So you're saying this could be nails or could be scratches? I mean, this could be nail
Right,
scratches
or-
or could be teeth?
Yes, there's a possibility that those could be scratches.
When you were asked on direct examination, that wasn't your testimony, was it? I turned you to page 101, line 13.
On what day?
Sorry, the last hearing date is the thickest of the three. Yes, it's page 101, line 13. May I have permission to help you on that?
Yes. One.
It's the thick one.
Okay.
Okay. No, that's the wrong site, so we're gonna, you got that one. At that hearing, when you last testified, did you say that teeth made those marks? You were unable to say which teeth, but it was teeth?
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay, so your position from the voir dire and from the trial testimony changed regarding this wound when you last testified at the Lanigan hearing?
I still think that they are probably teeth, but I cannot 100% rule out scratch marks.
Did you say something like, I'm not sure exactly what teeth made these? They could, one of them could, one set of these could be canine, one part of this, and an adjacent incisor tooth, but I'm not sure on the second set?
Again, it goes to the fact that the wounds are not very specific for differentiating between between teeth and claw marks. However, it's in the setting of a pattern, one can get a whole lot more information, and that is supported by the articles.
So getting back to wound number 2, when you described this for Mr. Alisi, he suggested to you, so even though you may not be able to identify the specific aspect of the dog dentition, you're able to identify this is from some aspect of dog dentition. Is that what you're saying? And you said yes. So you were saying at the last hearing, this is from dog dentition. Mm-hmm. Dog dentition is different than toenail marks.
Paw marks, yeah.
So your testimony
Yeah.
that you offered the jury in this case was different in regards to wound 2 than the testimony you offered the court at the first part of this hearing.
The jury?
Yeah, the jury. When you testified at trial, you said it
Trial.
was claw marks or teeth.
Uh-huh.
You said at the last hearing this was dentition, teeth. So the opinion has now changed.
I think for the most, well, I'm sorry if maybe I made a mistake.
No, I don't think so. I think your opinion has changed. You said this was either claw marks or tooth marks. You weren't sure. There was uncertainty at trial. At the Lanigan hearing, when you were asked by Mr. Alisi, he asked you specifically if this was dentition, and you said it was.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, so ask the question differently,
Okay.
without the commentary.
You're saying now this is not claw marks or toenail marks. This is by teeth, dentition.
I actually think it could be either.
Okay. Now, would you agree that is different than what you said the first time you testified at this hearing?
It sounds like it.
So you've gone back and forth kind of a little bit.
It's not a definite. It's not in and of itself that set of abrasions is not definitive.
Well, you didn't offer the jury the opinion that they weren't definitive or that you had confusion, did you?
I'm getting a little confused because at the jury, you told me that I said it was one or the other.
Right. And then you changed to it was dentition, and now you're back to claws or teeth?
I think it's still teeth, but yeah, I can't rule out the claws.
And because you have no comparative standard, you don't have a standard in the industry where you can look at this and say it has 6 points of contact or 6 features of similarity. You don't have anything like that. You're simply relying on your personal empirical experience.
Well, no, I also saw these 2 punctures, the punctate wounds right there.
Okay.
And that made me think that it was more teeth than claw marks.
This here you're describing
Yes.
as punctate?
Punctate,
Now,
yeah.
you never got the benefit of seeing Mr. O'Keefe, did you?
Personally, no.
Did you know he was Irish? Light skin?
Makes sense with that
Yeah.
name.
Freckles, moles. Look at these. They're all over his body. You don't think the dog was puncturing up all over here, did you?
No,
Right. So these are the same. These little things, these skin blemishes, same as these all over the body.
oh,
I
you're a
think-
doctor?
There's no question.
Do you think that what you're describing as dog puncture wounds, you could be mistaken for just his skin and the different types of marks on his skin, like freckles or moles?
I don't believe so, particularly since they're right where those wounds are, the abrasions are.
Well, wouldn't the skin blemishes be there before any abrasions?
I haven't seen a picture of him before this incident.
Right. Okay. So to get back to, we're now at, this is either a dog bite or it's a scratch. What is it about the top 2 that tell you it's a dog bite?
Would you rephrase that? Or, I mean, would
You're
you say it
saying-
again?
You're saying these are either dog bites or scratches. That's what you're saying. You're not sure which one, but it's definitely a dog. That's your position.
Yes.
Okay. What about these 2 are telling you that this is a dog bite?
I think I said it already previously, that they're parallel. They're parallel lines that seem to have these punctate lesions associated with them. And they're in and around the other lesions I believe are dog bites.
When a dog punctures and pulls, there's not an island of skin and then it goes back to the pull. The puncture starts at the pull and then it goes to the bottom, doesn't it?
There are no complete puncture wounds on this arm.
Well, you just cited puncture wound as the reason why you think this was a dog bite. You said these aren't
That is in-
these are not a skin condition, rather they're puncture wounds, and that was the basis for saying these are bites.
No.
If you don't know if these are puncture wounds or not, how can you say these are dog bite?
First of all, I did not say, with all due respect, I did not say they were puncture wounds. They are punctate lesions.
Okay. And so
They're different.
the punctate lesion, is that caused by a tooth?
Yes, I believe it is.
And you know when a dog punctures, it then tears and pulls.
Only if they penetrate the skin. They have to penetrate in order to pull,
Okay. And the
to create a laceration and pull.
and a puncture is not a penetration?
A puncture is, a punctate lesion is not.
And so what about these 2 linear abrasions? What science, what comparative analysis, what evidence do you have that these are caused by teeth
It's part of the pattern,
of this whole pattern?
of this whole pattern.
But just like wound number 1, independently, this doesn't tell you anything. You can't give an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that this was caused by a dog standing on its own.
By itself, it's consistent with, but yes, I cannot say by itself that it's caused by a dog.
Okay.
That
And this-
lesion by
and-
itself.
And there's nothing about these scratches that are consistent with the horseshoe shape of a nail of a dog, is there?
You mean the horseshoe shape of the jaw?
No, the
of a
dog's nail, the dog's nails,
paw nail,
toenail,
toenail?
yeah.
There's nothing specific, no.
So again, to have any real opinion to a medical degree of certainty, you need to look at everything together. You cannot look at this and tell us any specific identifying feature that would support an opinion or conclusion to a degree of medical certainty it was caused by a dog bite or a dog scratch?
Mr. Brennan, that's the way medicine is. You know, in medicine, you don't just look at one complaint or one wound or one test and make a diagnosis. You usually need several supporting tests or other lesions to corroborate a diagnosis. So that's part of medicine.
So you would agree with my statement, what I just said?
Would you repeat it?
Of course. So there is nothing specific with regards to these 3 scratches in and of themselves, without looking at the entire arm. There's nothing about these 3 that you can say with specificity that supports an opinion that they were caused by a dog bite or a dog scratch.
I disagree. I think the combination of the punctate lesions right there and there, along with the linear parallel abrasions, supports that assessment.
Do you have any papers, any studies that show that a scratch like this, that would look like this, is a dog bite or a dog scratch based just on the appearance of these 3 scratches?
Just on the appearance, no. Usually the studies that I've read have pictures of multiple lesions, and in those pictures of multiple lesions, there may be lesions like this, individual lesions.
You can't tell, in your opinion, these are dog bites or dog scratches, so is there anything specific about them that can lead you to a reasonable conclusion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that these were caused by a dog? Putting aside the whole panoply of scratches, these here, what about them is unique and distinct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll just after what's been called 2.
What about them?
Okay, again, they're consistent with dog bites and scratches, and together with the overall picture of the numerous wounds, it paints a picture that makes me sure that this is from a dog attack.
Okay, I won't ask again, but I wasn't asking about the overall wounds. We're going to get to that. I was asking just about these 3, but I'll leave your answer as it stands. Let's move to wound number 3. Now, wound number 3 really is a collection of scrapes, and you gave some testimony about the first 2. So if we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in wound 3, we have 5 larger abrasions on the top of the elbow. You see that?
I do.
And then you see a couple of dots down here. Yes?
Yes.
And I want to ask you some questions, and what I'll do, even though this is wound 3, I'll talk about scrape 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so we know what we're referring to. Is that fair?
Yes, but
Okay.
again, any one little tiny part of the image or wound is, it's not going to be sufficient to make a diagnosis. I need the pattern.
You never recognized that in your voir dire testimony or in your trial testimony before the jury, that you needed the collection of all abrasions to have an opinion. Instead, isn't it fair to say that you were talking about individual wounds as if they stood on their own?
I believe that
Objection, Your Honor.
Can you answer that? I'm going to
that is unfair. That's incorrect.
It wasn't until Mr. Alisi directed you that you started talking about dog attack and collection of wounds as a whole.
That is incorrect.
Okay. So looking at these wounds, wound number 3, and I know it may be a series of wounds, it might not be one wound in your opinion, but let's talk about this collection of abrasions, okay? Do you remember in the voir dire talking about this collection of abrasions, and you were saying they were consistent with teeth or claw marks?
Okay.
Is that what you said at the voir dire?
I'd have to look again.
Okay. Well, why don't we look at page 38, line 13?
Mine is gone. I don't have a board there.
Okay. We'll have to get you one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's 48, line 13.
What page?
That one's not right either. No. Okay. Well, let me withdraw that question. Did you testify previously that these are consistent with teeth or claw marks?
Did I testify when?
Previously.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. And do you have a different opinion today whether these are teeth or claw marks?
No.
So you think that these could either be teeth or claw marks?
I think they're more likely teeth marks,
Which one of these 5 do you think are teeth marks?
all of them.
You think all 3 are teeth marks? Do you think a dog bit Mr. O'Keefe and inflicted these at the same time or different times?
I believe that this was this configuration, this collection right
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
I believe this is one bite.
One bite. And so if we were to follow your theory, this was one bite, this would be the arc of the dog's mouth?
Yes, it could be.
Well, is there an arc here?
There appears to be.
Okay. And we know that when a dog punctures, it then from the top teeth pulls down, the bottom pulls up, right?
Push it.
So if this is the arc of the dog right here, and it's like a half of a sun or a half moon over the elbow, you claim these 2 dots are consistent with puncture wounds?
No, punctate lesions.
Oh, punctate lesions, I'm sorry. Which teeth, upper or lower teeth, do you think caused these 5?
I believe those were the upper teeth.
So you believe this is a canine on the left, number 1, and a canine on the right, number 5?
It could be.
Okay. Now, if here's the arc of the dog's mouth, and this is a canine on 1 and 5, where do the canines puncture and pull? Up or down?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Where do the canine teeth puncture? From the bottom or from the top?
So if these are, let me use my pointer here. If these are canines, and this could, by the way, be this also could be 2 separate bites. But if these are canines, they usually would start on the based on this picture, the upper or higher area and
Right.
pull down.
Right. They would have to start up and pull down if that was an arc of a mouth, wouldn't it? But you see the bottom of these wounds, right? The round part that is closer to a puncture is on the bottom. Aren't they going in the wrong direction if this is the arc of the mouth?
No, I don't think that they are going in the wrong direction. You have to keep in mind that presumably Mr. O'Keefe was not standing there and letting the dog just chew on his arm. Okay, that there's
How do you
relative
know that?
movement.
Objection, Your Honor.
How do you know that?
The question's allowed.
No, but she's not finishing her answer, Your Honor.
The question's allowed.
How do you know what he was doing?
Because it's normal human behavior that if you're,
How do you know what he was doing? How do you know what Mr. O'Keefe was doing that night?
again, it's normal human behavior to pull away from someone that's attacking you, a person or an animal. That's normal human behavior. If he was still throughout this whole attack, I would be looking for a different set of wounds.
You're speculating about all of these comments about what he was doing and not doing. You have no idea what he was doing, do you?
I'm just
Objection, Your Honor.
The question, can you answer that question, Doctor?
I'm basing it on normal human behavior.
And so you would disagree with me that if these were dog bites, the part that's thicker, that is more similar, although not a puncture, would start at the bottom and work up, meaning the dog's head was over here on the top. You disagree with me about that?
Do I disagree?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that that's
Okay.
incorrect.
Oh. And if these are canines, did you measure the distance between the canines?
Again, there's no ruler, but the other thing is we don't know what position his elbow was in at the time of this. So So it could be, although it looks like it's a larger, a larger configuration than a normal canine distance, intercanine distance. That's what you're referring to, the intercanine distance. If his arm was flexed, that distance would be shorter. So you cannot make any assessment based on this picture.
Do you notice the differences between the left mark and the right mark are a greater distance than wound number 1, where you said that it was 2 canines that caused these linear abrasions?
And there's no elbow between the linear abrasions of wound collection number 1. There's no elbow up here to be flexed.
Let me ask again, do you notice the difference between these two is wider than the difference between wound number 1 when you said it was 2 canines?
You mean this mark here versus this mark here? Is that what you're talking about?
Wound 3, number 1, number 5, where you said these could be canines, you notice the distance is different than the distance where you claim that wound 1 was caused by 2 canines. Do you notice the difference in distance?
Again, I'm not clear what you're asking me. Are you asking me the distance between this tooth and that tooth? I think what you're asking me is the intercanine distance. Is that what you're asking me about?
Intercanine distance, I've never heard that word.
Well,
Is that a new one?
no, that's
Okay.
well known in the medical literature.
Let's just look at simple math or size. The distance between these 2 wounds is a greater distance than where you said it was canines in wound number 1, isn't it?
Again, I believe I just explained it, that if the elbow was flexed at the time that the wound was inflicted, or the bite was inflicted, you would get these 2 wounds that are closer to one another than they appear here, because the arm is partially extended here, and skin moves.
Are you saying this is a full bite, puncture wound top and bottom?
Excuse me?
Are you saying this was a full bite of puncture wounds, bottom canines, top canines? Are you saying this is a full bite?
I don't believe no, this is not a full bite. There is no significant penetration of the skin. So this is not a full bite or a complete bite.
Did you say at trial, at the elbow, there's another different series of marks that again have linear abrasions up where the pointer is, and then down below some punctate, superficial round small abrasions, again representing upper and lower teeth, in my opinion. Was that your opinion at trial, that this represented upper and lower teeth?
Yes.
And these lower teeth, which teeth were these?
What teeth?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Were they the canines?
Could be a canine, could be incisors.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. And so your opinion at trial is these 4 could all be canines?
Which 4?
1, 2, and then the 2 punctures, or punctate.
That is a possibility. It is actually, and I think I said this too, that this could actually be a configuration of 2 separate bites, where you have canine, puncture wound, punctate lesion from so upper canines, lower canines. And then this could be a separate one. Just can't tell. There's not enough specificity in this configuration of wounds.
And you have nothing to compare it to either.
No.
Do you see the distance is different between what you said is a 4-set upper and lower canine and this one here, this canine? Do you see the obvious difference?
With all due
distance?
respect, Mr. Brennan, again, the elbow moves, so the skin moves. The skin overlying the elbow moves, and we don't know the configuration that this arm was in at the time those wounds were inflicted. You cannot make a generalization.
I'm going to ask you one more time. You don't have to answer. Do you see the obvious distance between wound 1 and 3 where you say that it was the canines? Do you see that?
Objection, Your Honor.
So I'm going to strike the part that says you don't need to answer. Can you answer that question, please, Doctor? And then we'll move on, Mr. Brennan.
I see the difference, but I understand the difference.
Okay. if these were canine wounds, they can't be claw wounds, right?
Yes.
And based on your knowledge and study and whatever you're relying on, you have no way of telling if this is canines or a claw.
Not 100%, correct?
Not even 100%. You don't have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether it's canines or claws, do you?
I believe those are canines.
Did you testify at the Lanigan hearing when Mr. Alisi was asking you questions? Did you observe any claw marks with regard to the injuries, and you said it's possible?
Possible, yes.
How can you give an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty it was canines, and in the same breath and statement say, well, it's possibly claw wounds as well?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
My opinion about reasonable degree of medical certainty is about the whole arm, the configuration, the pattern of the whole arm, and not any one individual wound.
Okay. Wound 4 up here. What do you think this might be?
I don't know. I'm not certain.
Well, I mean, in the totality of a dog attack, it has to be something related to a dog because we don't know that it was there before. It had to have been something. Right?
It's probably related to the dog, yes.
Well, you don't think he just had this independent wound and then all these came from the dog attack and this one just happened to be hanging out waiting for them?
That's correct. I don't
Right.
think that he had a separate wound.
You don't think this one maybe was caused by the broken shards of glass from the taillight during an alleged collision, but the other ones were from something totally different, do you?
No, because it has an orientation about it. It's oriented, again, in a somewhat vertical orientation, similar to many of these other sets of wounds.
I don't know what that means. It has a vertical orientation. How does that help us understand if this wound existed before or after the so-called dog attack?
It has some similarity of pattern.
So you think this was caused during the alleged dog attack?
Yes,
Okay. What caused this wound during the alleged dog attack?
I don't know.
Is that because there's no methodology or comparative standards, so you can't compare it to anything?
No, this because there's not enough specificity in that one particular wound all by itself.
What are the options? How could it have been caused during this dog attack?
By a tooth
Okay.
or claw, most likely.
Could it have been caused by the ground?
I doubt it, considering that, again, it's oriented in a similar fashion to the rest of the lesions.
Okay. When you read the background facts of this case, well, let me ask you. If a dog attacks an arm, it's going to create force on the arm, wouldn't it?
It depends on how much penetration. Yes, it depends on how strong the bite is, how much penetration. It gets through the clothing. Clothing that's on the intervening between the arm and the dog is going to present a little bit of a buffer.
Well, let's talk about the force on the arm. If this was a dog attack, as you claim, that means the teeth and or the claws penetrated that sweater and caused an abrasion on Mr. O'Keefe's arm, correct?
Yes.
So there had to be an amount of force pulling on the arm to create that friction, which led to the abrasion.
Yes.
Okay. Did you know from any of the facts that you reviewed that when Mr. O'Keefe supposedly left the car, he had a glass in his hand with a straw in the glass?
I'm aware that there was a glass in his hand.
And you're aware when he was found by the side of the road that glass, the broken part of the glass, was right near him with the straw?
I don't know anything about the straw, but yes, I know.
And so if there's a dog attack and somebody's holding a glass,
Uh-huh.
right, they're not likely to continue to hold on to the glass throughout the duration of the attack and then move somewhere else with that glass.
I don't know if he was holding on to the glass during the dog attack.
Well, hypothetically, assume that the evidence is he supposedly was holding the glass. Wouldn't a dog attack rip that out of his hand? Wouldn't he drop the glass?
There are many possibilities here. He could have transferred it to the other hand.
Let's look at wound number 5. you remember testifying about this?
Yes,
And you said it looks like an arch?
it does to
Okay.
me.
Are you saying the arch is on the top or on the bottom?
No, I thought the arch was on the bottom. But by bottom, I mean what we call proximal part of the arm. So here, right here is where I think the arch is.
And if this is an arch and these are dog bites, these would be the canines.
They could be, however, I can't rule out that this is, because of the curvature of the arm, I can't rule out that this was from a canine and incisor teeth.
Well, this is a different angle than here, right? But there's no flexion like in the elbow on this wound area. This is the bottom of the wrist, right?
That's correct. However, that part of the arm has a different configuration than the upper arm. And it's got it's got a bone right underneath it.
So you're
the
saying...
ulnar bone.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it's got the ulnar bone. So a wound to that area is going to look different than a similarly placed or caused wound to this area, which has a lot of padding underneath it from the soft tissue, subcutaneous tissue, and doesn't have the protuberance of this bone right here.
We have a distance problem when we compare these, don't we?
We have a what?
A distance problem. The distances are different. If these are canines, obviously it's a different dog or something else that caused it because the distances are clearly different, right?
Again, one has to know how wounds occur, and I didn't say that those are definitely two canine teeth on the periphery. I'm saying that I believe that this is a combination of canine and incisor teeth.
When a dog bites and tears, you see a missing tear pattern, don't you? You see the skin gets torn on many occasions?
Yes, but we don't have any of that here. We have no penetrating wounds here.
Right. Is it remarkable to you that if this was a dog bite with canines, there is no tearing of the skin? Is that remarkable to you?
No, because that dog was not able to create the force enough to penetrate the skin through that sweater.
Could I have Exhibit 32, please? Okay. You've seen this picture before?
Yes,
Okay. And this is allegedly is a dog bite from Chloe?
yes,
And you see the tearing of the skin, don't you?
yes,
And you can see the corners where the incisors would penetrate through a puncture. Yes?
I'm not sure what teeth punctured this, but yes,
And
I
this-
see the skin is all penetrated.
This is consistent with the literature of a tear and a hold and a pull, right?
No,
Okay.
no, absolutely not.
This is not consistent with the dog biting and then pulling the skin.
This is consistent with an avulsion wound caused by a dog.
Okay. Very different wound than what we looked at on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
On
Mr. O'Keefe's arm, very different, right?
correct.
Okay. If we can go back to 5, please. Now, your opinion that this is a dog attack. Have you ever had peer review of this opinion with this photograph?
No,
No. You would agree that this dog bite science is what they call a soft science. Would you agree with that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, well, it's not like DNA. It's opinion-based. It's subjective-based, the science of dog bites, isn't it?
It's based on a lot of training.
Yeah, and a lot of subjective opinion, too, wouldn't you say?
There's opinion here, yes.
Uncertainty,
There is some, yes.
right. And being that type of science, haven't you read in the studies about peer review, how peer review works?
What specifically are you?
That you have another qualified professional look at it and question and vet whatever opinions you're giving. Did you go through that process at all?
I've been through that process, yes.
You've been, okay, and who peer reviewed
You
your
mean
findings?
this case?
Yes.
Oh, no, not this case. No, I thought that this information was rather confidential, and I didn't share this
Okay.
information.
Well, you discussed with the defense other information in this case, didn't you, about the accident and about people's opinions? You've discussed that as part of your opinion, haven't you?
Yes?
Okay. Did you know that the U.S. Attorney's Office employed a deputy medical examiner to look at these bites? And then he had commented that the wounds at 2 to 3 millimeters, up to 7 centimeters, were documented on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, and the injuries do not photographically appear to be, nor are described as puncture bite wounds, and thus are highly unlikely to be the result of an animal bite attack. Did you get that expert opinion from the United States Attorney's Office when they investigated this case to consider as part of peer review?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I did not get that, but,
Did you say you did get that?
no, I did not get that.
Oh,
However, I have a comment about that.
Go ahead, you can
Please.
answer.
Not very not very many medical examiners have the experience first of all, have experience with dog bites, seeing hundreds and thousands of dog bites and treating them. And not very many medical examiners have even autopsied a case of dog bites. So although, some physicians have certain opinions based on what they know, they don't have my experience. I'm
Do
sorry.
you know if Mr. Walsh has your experience or not?
I don't know, who
The
is it?
gentleman who gave this opinion that was employed by the federal government, do you know if he had your experience or not?
What's his name?
Mr. Walsh,
No,
John Walsh.
No, I don't.
So he could have more experience for all you know.
Oh, I'm highly unlikely.
Okay, you have more experience than anybody in the country.
I think I have at least as much experience as any other possible person in the country. And I have it from both aspects, from the clinical aspect and from the forensic aspect.
Did you review the opinion of Dr. Kenneth Kinsey, who said that those injuries were not caused by a canine?
Dr. Who?
Kenneth Kinsey.
No?
No. If you look, I believe Mr. O'Keefe's arm were completely bent when he sustained the injuries. A lot of them match up. They're a continuation of another injury.
And I don't even know who Dr. Kinsey is.
Okay.
Is that
So-
a medical doctor?
So you don't have any peer review at all? You have nobody who's given an opinion similar to yours about this being dog bites, do you?
Is Dr. I'm sorry.
You have no peer review. You have no peer endorsement. Everything that you have no peer endorsement for any of your opinions, do you?
I didn't think I was allowed to show these pictures to anyone.
When you're giving opinions about the teeth and suggesting that there's might be bend, things you don't really know about, you would agree it would be best to look at the dog, Chloe itself, right?
Not necessary.
If you looked at Chloe and examined Chloe, you would know whether or not there are any irregularities in Chloe's teeth, wouldn't you?
Yes, I might.
Might, you would see it, wouldn't you?
Well, if I got close enough, and
Right.
I don't know if I want to get close enough to Chloe.
Well, why wouldn't you want to? You're a medical doctor. You want to have an opinion to a degree of medical certainty. Why wouldn't you want to see the best evidence of the distance between the teeth and Chloe? Why wouldn't you?
I'd have to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in danger.
Okay. And if you saw Chloe, you could see if there was any missing teeth, couldn't you?
Yes.
You could actually measure the canines in Chloe, and then you could compare them to what you're calling dog wounds on Mr. O'Keefe's arm. You could do that, couldn't you?
I would have to get a veterinarian to sedate the patient, the dog, because going near that dog would be very dangerous. They'd have to sedate the dog to measure the intercanine distance.
What if you did get a veterinarian to sedate the dog, and then you could safely go and look at Chloe, and you could actually take a mold of Chloe's mouth, right? Mm-hmm. Yes? You've read that in the literature. The best way to
could.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
There's only one person who's not going to.
You've read in the literature the best way to compare the teeth and the mark is you actually do a mold of the dog's mouth. You know how valuable that can be in analysis, don't you?
It can be, but the question, I believe the question here is not which dog created these wounds, but did a dog create these wounds?
That's not my question. My question is, if you took a mold of Chloe's mouth, you would see the distance between the canines. And you could measure it, quantify it, not guess and speculate, quantify it, correct?
Your Honor, could we approach, please?
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so you can continue, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Russell, when you're examining these separate wounds and the distances and the depths between them, and guessing whether or not it was a canine or incisor, wouldn't you agree it would be helpful if you had a safe opportunity to actually examine the dog Chloe?
It could be.
If you had a safe opportunity to examine Chloe, you could look at the size of Chloe's jaw.
It could be, but those wounds on you're shaking your
That's
head.
not my question.
Okay.
My question is, if you had an opportunity to go safely and look at Chloe, you would be able to tell the size of Chloe's jaw. You could measure it.
Possibly, yes.
You could determine the gape of Chloe's jaw, couldn't you?
I don't know what the gape of
How it bites, how wide it opens up.
I'm not sure I could determine that.
Okay, you could look at Chloe's teeth.
As they are now, yes.
You could measure the distance between the canines if they still exist in Chloe's mouth.
Yes, from a model of, or imprint from Chloe's mouth.
You could take a mold,
Right, a mold.
or you could take a tape measure or a ruler, and you could measure. You could
Oh,
do
that
both.
wouldn't be very reliable.
I see. You could determine whether or not she had one incisor, or whether she had 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6 incisors.
Currently, yes, but I can't tell what the condition of the teeth were during the incident.
Uh-huh. You could tell if there's any missing teeth.
Correct.
Right. You could look at Chloe's paws, couldn't you?
Yes.
You could do moldings of those and measure those as well, couldn't you?
I'm not sure that that would be useful.
Well, if
Measuring
you think that some of these wounds could have been scratches, you could look at the nails and the shape of the nails, couldn't you?
Well, nails are frequently cut on a regular
course.
basis, and the distance between the distance between the nails, as you mentioned earlier, can change depending on whether or not the paw is in a compressed state or a more relaxed state. So that wouldn't be reliable.
So you would not even consider measuring the paws because you think that would be unreliable?
I don't think it would be reliable, no.
You wouldn't study the toenails to see the shape of them?
If I could, I'd look to see if there's an abnormal toenail,
Right.
for instance.
Right.
Yes.
And so there would be a benefit to doing that. You didn't do that, though, did you? You didn't go see Chloe and take a mold of Chloe's mouth, did you?
It wasn't necessary.
Well, did you go up and take pictures or measure the teeth of Chloe?
No.
Did you ask to?
No, it was my understanding that Chloe was in another state, but again, I didn't think it was necessary, and I have reasons why I didn't think it was necessary.
You thought that Chloe was in another state. Did you ever discuss going to see Chloe and doing these studies on Chloe so you could see if they were dissimilar to these abrasions?
I was asked to evaluate the wounds.
Do you know that Chloe exists, that we provided notice to you, that we went up and saw Chloe and took molds? Did you know that?
Objection, Your Honor.
Did you know that? I'm going to allow it. Did you know that, Doctor?
I do know that now, yes.
Did you know that before you testified the last date in this case, that we actually went up and found Chloe and took molds and measured the paws and the teeth? Did you know that we did that?
I don't know, I don't recall.
Before you came in and testified at the last hearing, you don't recall whether you knew that Chloe was available?
I believe I knew that there was a consultant, that you hired a consultant, and I didn't know what that consultant was going to be doing.
Okay. Now that you know that Chloe's available, wouldn't those molds be helpful? Wouldn't you want to look at them and compare them to the distances on the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
I don't think it's necessary, for many reasons.
If the distance of Chloe's canines is significantly different than these abrasions in this picture, you would agree that the abrasions in Mr. O'Keefe's arm could not have been caused by Chloe. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree to that statement. Again, because of various factors such as elasticity of the skin, shrinkage. There's various factors.
So, if I understand, you have no interest in examining or seeing Chloe. It's irrelevant to your opinion?
I don't think I need to see Chloe.
Well, you said earlier, when I asked you about particular wounds, it would be helpful to know these things about missing teeth and spacing and distance between the canines. Is that no longer helpful to your opinion?
No, I think you're mischaracterizing what I said. I believe I said that it would give information about the condition of the teeth now, but it wouldn't give information about the condition of the teeth when that incident happened.
In the spirit of medicine and science, isn't more information good?
Generally.
Generally. But you generally would not want to go see and examine Chloe?
I don't think it's necessary, and there's so many reasons why.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Lessie, go right ahead.
If I could have you ready to
Sure.
organize the exhibits. Thank you, Your Honor.
They're organized. I just wanted to make sure I have the right ones. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
For the record, you have pre-marked number 33 through 37.
Thank you.
In Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan, I have provided the court and offered to counsel, but counsel already had the copies, a notebook that has exhibit numbers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Brennan has agreed that all the exhibits in the notebook can be in evidence. So that's number 2. And so if I'm remembering correctly, Your Honor's previous direction that if they're in evidence, just refer to them as such. So that's what I
Yes.
plan on doing.
Yes.
And what I also plan on doing, Your Honor, is taking the exhibits that are in the notebook. I've got non-binder ones individually for the witness that are
Okay.
pre-marked. Does that work also?
Sure, you can just put them up on the stand with Dr. Russell.
In my approach to do that?
Sure.
May I talk to the witness and just point out where they are?
I think you can give them to her. I think
Okay.
she can
That's-
figure out
okay.
numerically what's what. All right, Mr. Leslie, I'm not rushing you at all, but is it safe to say that you won't finish in 20 minutes?
That is safe, Your Honor.
Okay, so we will plan on breaking at 1. Mr. Clerk will have to cancel our afternoon list. How long do you think it might take? And I'm not holding you to this, just curious.
I appreciate the question. If I can just have a quick moment, because I knew what my redirect was going to be until Mr. Brennan went, and I'd like to consider what he did. My best estimate is approximately 2 hours.
Okay, I'd like us to finish by 4 today.
Yes, Your Honor, understood.
Mr. Brennan, I know you have no idea how long recross might be, but we'll try and finish by 4 today.
Understood, Your Honor.
May I now proceed, Your Honor?
Please.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, during cross-examination at this Daubert hearing on December 12th, you were asked whether you believed you were an expert in the areas of orthopedics, accident reconstruction, biomechanics, motor vehicle accidents, and defensive wounds. In your 30 in your 29-plus years of experience as an emergency medicine physician in training emergency medicine physicians, are you aware of any emergency room or emergency department physician being board certified in orthopedics?
No,
Are you aware of any emergency medicine physician being required to be an expert in overall orthopedics?
no. General orthopedics, no.
But do emergency medicine physicians nonetheless routinely evaluate and treat people injured in motor vehicle accidents?
Yes,
And did you, in your 29 years of experience as emergency medicine physician, routinely evaluate and treat people injured in motor vehicle accidents?
yes, I worked at a busy level 1 trauma center.
During your cross-examination in response to a question, you stated that you were an expert in emergency orthopedics. Can you please explain that?
Yes, so emergency orthopedics is a subset or just a part of the overall field of general orthopedics. So in emergency orthopedics, physicians care for, evaluate, diagnose, treat patients who have acute injuries and that don't need operative care. So acute fractures, acute dislocations, those types of injuries are done in many busy emergency rooms, right in the emergency room, and that's what I have expertise in.
Did the rotation at the, you just said busy hospital that you were at, did the rotation when you were training, were you required to take a part of the training in emergency orthopedics?
I was required to take a 1-month rotation in orthopedics.
Now, you were asked during cross-examination at this voir dire about one particular specialized training that you had involving motor vehicle accidents, and you, in response to a question from Mr. Brennan, agreed that that particular course was rudimentary. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When did you take that course that you referred to as rudimentary?
It was around 1979.
And what profession did you have when you took this rudimentary course that you were asked about?
I was a police officer at that time.
And since that one rudimentary course that you had, have you had further training with regard and experience to humans injured in motor vehicle accidents?
Yes, much.
And describe the much that experience and training you've had in that area.
Well, during my 29 years working in the emergency department, we saw motor vehicle accident victims on every shift, and usually there were multiple victims on every shift. So that was part of it, plus we had lectures and seminars on motor vehicle accidents, victims.
And is your focus in your testimony, both in June of this year and in December of this year, on wounds from motor vehicle accidents or how motor vehicle accidents occur?
So as a physician, my focus is on the wounds and injuries caused by motor vehicle accidents and how to diagnose and treat them.
So, are you sitting as a medical doctor giving opinions on medical causation of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
During cross-examination, in this hearing, you were asked about whether you were an expert in accident reconstruction. Is being an expert in accident reconstruction necessary to practice emergency medicine?
No.
Does an emergency medicine physician need to be an expert in accident reconstruction to evaluate and treat people injured in motor vehicle accidents in the emergency department?
No.
In your 29 years experience as an emergency medicine physician and training emergency medicine physicians, are you aware of any emergency medicine physician being an expert in accident reconstruction?
No.
Is accident reconstruction even relevant to the practice of emergency medicine?
No.
Is whether an emergency medicine physician an expert in accident reconstruction a reasoned question in the field of emergency medicine?
No.
During cross-examination in this hearing, you were also asked about whether you have a degree in biomechanics. In your 29 years experience as an emergency medicine physician and training emergency medicine physicians, are you aware of any emergency medicine physician who is an expert in biomechanics?
No.
Is being an expert in biomechanics necessary to practice emergency medicine?
No.
Is whether an emergency medicine physician is an expert in the field of biomechanics a reasoned question in the field of emergency medicine?
No.
In your 29 years of experience as a medical doctor, where do most people go for the treatment of acute injuries from motor vehicle accidents?
To the emergency department.
Do you know, or have you had any experience where a person who has an acute injury from a motor vehicle accident goes to an expert in biomechanics?
No.
Do you know whether anybody who's injured in a motor vehicle accident, acute injury, goes to an expert in accident reconstruction?
No.
On cross in this hearing, you were asked about your expertise in, quote, self-defense. Was your direct testimony in this hearing in your report of December 9 about self-defense or defensive wounds?
Would you repeat that question?
Sure. Was your direct testimony in this hearing in December and the report that you prepared dated December 9th, was that about self-defense or defensive wounds?
My testimony was about defensive wounds, not self-defense.
What's the difference between self-defense and defensive wounds?
Well, I believe self-defense is something like martial arts and the study and techniques of defending oneself from an attack. That's what I believe self-defense is.
You were also asked on cross in this hearing about whether not observing how a wound to the posterior side of a forearm occurred provided you with sufficient context to determine whether a wound was a defensive wound. What context did you have with regard to the wounds on the right arm of the decedent to reach your conclusion that those wounds were defensive wounds?
Well, the context is the configuration, the location of the wounds. The location of the wounds and, the presence of a dog.
In the cross in this hearing, you've been asked whether you have observed how wounds are created. In your experience, do emergency physicians or forensic pathologists get to observe how wounds are created?
No.
Do emergency medicine physicians and forensic pathologists nonetheless often reach medical diagnostic conclusions without observing how the wounds are created?
Yes, they do.
And is that a common or uncommon practice for emergency medicine physicians?
Well, that's common.
How common?
Well, I think it's fairly common.
You were also asked whether someone could, and this is on cross in this hearing, whether someone could incur wounds to the posterior side of the forearm if they fall to the ground backwards. Did the wounds to the right arm of the decedent in this case arise from him falling to the ground backwards?
No,
Why not?
because of the configuration and the pattern of the wounds.
And do you come to that conclusion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
You were also asked on cross in this hearing about when someone hits a moving or a floating object, whether the patterns are dynamic and changing all the time, and the hitting concept. Can you please explain the question that was posed to you about moving, floating objects and hitting objects and how you evaluated those issues with respect to the decedent in this case?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Doctor, did you understand the question?
Not exactly.
Okay, ask the question differently.
On cross, you were asked about when someone hits a moving or floating object, whether the patterns are dynamic or change. Can you please explain those concepts in that question and how you analyze them with regard to the wounds of the decedent in this case?
Okay. When there is movement and there is contact, there is movement of the, for lack of a better word, inflicting object, such as a tooth or something else. There is movement along the skin during the period of time in which they are in contact. That's what I understood that I was being asked.
On cross-examination, you were asked several questions about pattern recognition and pattern recognition methodology. And you were asked about the development, that's what I want to start with, of your pattern recognition skills with regard to dog-inflicted wounds. How did you develop your pattern recognition skills with regard to dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Well, as I testified earlier, I've seen many, many, many dog bite victims. And sometimes I was able to talk to, I closely examined their wounds. And not only examined, but evaluated, treated. But in many cases, I was also able to talk to them and ask them about how the wounds were inflicted. And I did this over and over and over again, hundreds of times. I think I testified to about at least 500 times over the years. So as you do that, you learn. You know, you recognize, you get sharper. So that's how I did.
And did you also edit any peer-reviewed publications that were relevant to pattern recognition and pattern recognition methodology?
Yes, I did. Now, pattern recognition in general, first of all, pattern recognition in general is a really important feature of medicine. It's critical. It's so important. And we start learning pattern recognition from medical school, from the beginning of medical school, learning how to recognize patterns of cells in pap smears and biopsies, patterns of cells. That's what a lot of pathology is, pattern recognition. And so, and even radiologists use pattern recognition when they look at x-rays of pneumonia, for instance. Different pneumonias have different patterns. So pattern recognition is something that I've been doing since the beginning of medical school, and actually a little bit before medical school. So that was 50 years ago, I think. 40 years ago.
Is pattern recognition some novel or unscientific process, or is it rooted in evidence-based medical science?
Oh, it's definitely evidence-based medical science. And in fact, there are textbooks on how to recognize certain patterns. So there, for instance, in pathology and, in medicine, there are textbooks on how to tell if somebody's got liver cancer or somebody's got, some other disease. This is pattern recognition for the most part. And x-rays too. It's in textbooks. There are huge textbooks and numerous textbooks written about this.
Is pattern recognition methodology that you've been testifying about, is that generally accepted in the medical community?
Pattern recognition as a methodology? Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Alessi, we're going to take our break. We'll be back at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Your Honor. All rise to the court, please.
How are you?